Today we're discussing a big NHL trade that was being discussed at the NHL Trade Deadline between the Penguins and the Canucks. It never actually happened. It didn't go through, was rejected, but what were the fine details and could it be revisited? We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're taking a look at a trade that came close to happening at the NHL Trade Deadline, but of course never ended up going through, ended up getting rejected or put off to the side. Did they run out of time? What were the details? We're going to go ahead and discuss this scenario today and see what we think the chances are that couldn't be revisited this offseason and maybe actually take place after all. Now, of course, this deal, like I said, between Pittsburgh and Vancouver was centered around JT Miller. Now, we know the Vancouver Canucks was looking at trading Miller last offseason. They were not getting any returns and offers that they thought were acceptable, good enough value to trade the player. They ended up inking him to a long-term extension. As the season started, and of course, they come into training camp with him signed, Horvat unsigned. I think it didn't take them too long to realize that maybe they made a mistake. Things were not going well. Of course, we ended up seeing a coaching change. Things have not gone well in Vancouver, and even though statistically Miller has put up some good numbers this year after getting this season together, there's still lots of instances, especially early on, with lack of effort, poor defensive play, and other parts of his game that just certainly seem quite lackluster. And I think fans and management and everybody were certainly a little frustrated and unhappy to see how things unfolded. Of course, this ended up inevitably leading to the Bo Horvat trade. Their longtime player, Canuck captain, dealt to the New York Islanders. Of course, Anthony Beauvillier has come over in that trade. He's actually done pretty well for them, but still not, the same kind of player as Horvat was. And I think a lot of people were quite sad to see Horvat go. So people are kind of surprised at this point to now hear the fact that Miller's actually being mentioned in trade talks, and the Canucks still might treat him after all. Now, of course, part of that new contract offer was that it didn't negotiate a no trade clause in the new contract, but it was not backdated, which you can do sometimes, so that no trade clause does not kick in until July 1st. So they could trade him now to anywheres without his consent, not needing him to waive anything, which is, obviously something they would be concerned about afterwards once that kicks in. I think at this point, they're looking at the contract and saying, well, you know what, for the next few years, he should be able to produce at the level that he's getting paid at. After that would likely be where you'd start to have concerns the second half of the contract. But at the end of the day, it's already a done deal, and that is what it is. But they did come close to getting a deal done with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And of course, for JT Miller, that would be a bit of a homecoming. He is from that area, so I don't imagine he'd have any issues playing there himself. But like I said, things were close. According to Frank Saravalli, NHL Insider, talking on his most recent episode of his podcast, the DFO Rundown from dailyfaceoff.com. He was talking, of course, with Jason Gregor about some deals that he thought might come together this offseason, and mentioned how he thought JT Miller going to Pittsburgh might be a possibility because of how close the Canucks and Penguins got at the deadline, and went over to kind of give more details on the discussions and thought that there was a chance they could be revisited. Now, ultimately, we don't know where things really went wrong. Saravalli never really went into fine details. Maybe he's not sure on what broke things down and where the talks ended. But essentially, the fine details were the Vancouver Canucks trading Miller to the Penguins in exchange for multiple first-round picks and Jason Zucker. Now, Zucker was not going to remain in Vancouver. He said things were so far down the road and getting close enough that the Canucks were actually already talking to other third-party teams about flipping Zucker and what the kind of deals might look at for that part of the trade. It could end up basically being a 3-team trade at the end of the day. I mean, to give up multiple first-round picks. I've seen a variety of reactions here on social media from both fan bases. I think the Vancouver Canucks, they're part of the fan base that would have been happy to see Miller go because they were frustrated with him early in the year. And as much as, they would always obviously agree that the production is important, to get 2 first-rounders would be a pretty solid deal, and plus whatever you could get for flipping Zucker as well. So that's certainly nothing to be really upset about. To me, that would be a fantastic return. I think Vancouver and Alvin and Rutherford should be running along with that if they can get it done. I've seen Penguin fans, of course, saying that Ron Hextall should be fired if he made that kind of trade, because that's way too much of a price tag to pay for JT Miller, because, of course, Penguins fans have seen Yes, the production is good, but but some of the things that come with Miller is it really worth it overall. But this Penguins team, as we know, is a win-now mode. They're trying to get into playoffs. They want to make as many potential runs as they can with the big three, with Crosby, Malkin, Letang. Well, I still have them under contract, still playing at a pretty good level for the next few years. Adding a guy like Miller, who is obviously a veteran player, who is able to produce at a good level, could be a huge addition to their top six. He's versatile where you can play him. You can put him on center. You can put him on the wing. You can do different spots. He can play in the power play. Like, there's lots there that he could be a good help and might be able to, really solidify the top six. There's no doubt that could be, a good fit from that regard. I mean, at the same time, though, as far as the contract status beyond the next few years, instead if they're concerned about the back half of the contract, well, by that point, Crosby, Letang, and Malkin are all going to be, starting to fade out, and maybe they don't care. I mean, a lot of NHL GMs don't necessarily think too far into the future because they don't know themselves how long they're going to be in that role. And to be completely honest, I wouldn't even be shocked if we've seen a change in Pittsburgh when it comes to Ron Hextall this offseason anyhow. I think if the Penguins end up missing the playoffs, I wouldn't be shocked if we hear that Hextall, as the general manager, is being replaced. I'm not sure about Brian Burke as president. Wouldn't be surprised if he stayed on. Mike Sullivan as head coach has been given a longer-term contract extension already. I don't see Sullivan going on anywhere. I think whoever becomes a new GM, if Hextall is replaced, will ultimately inherit him. And, but they may feel differently on a Miller trade. I don't know, obviously, what their thoughts would be because we don't know who it's going to be or if there's going to be a change at all. But ultimately, Sarah Valley feels that Vancouver is still very much likely to revisit this type of trade in the offseason. And even though they've played well under Rick Tocchet, even though Miller himself has produced relatively well, that if they can get out of the contract by trading him, that they're going to do it. And if they have the opportunity in a deal like that, 2 first-rounders, that's a pretty hefty price tag in my opinion. Of course, Zucker is a pending unrestricted free agent, so it likely wouldn't be him involved in the trade anymore. Hard to say what would go down. The cap situation is completely different in the offseason, so there might be different pieces or different players involved in some capacity from a money perspective. It's difficult to say. Vancouver likely would need to take some kind of a contract back, though. That much we can probably all agree on. But at the end of the day, do you think this price tag for Miller from Pittsburgh's side, is it way too much? Should they have proceeded with this deal? Is Vancouver doing the right thing if they can get this kind of return to pull the trigger? I'd certainly would like to know what everybody thinks down in the comments. It would not be overly shocking, in my opinion, at all if they do revisit this kind of trade. And to me, Pittsburgh is an ideal landing spot for Miller should Vancouver end up proceeding with this kind of trade. And if they can get that kind of return, I think they're laughing all the way to the bank. But I do agree for the Pens fans, it might be a little bit too much. And I don't know how they feel about that in the grand scheme of things. But let me know what you think in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.